I want to mention as we sit down that Elizabeth Fitzgerald, our chair, is actually on by phone tonight. Elizabeth, can you hear us, and can you just let us, just acknowledge us so we can see how well we can hear you?
Yes, I can hear you very good.
Great. Okay, wonderful. We will start with comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. Anyone?
I think when people want to talk about the bond, that would be under master planning.
Yeah, that's right. No one's raising their hand, and they are yes, and they are signing up. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 4, amendments to the agenda. Are there any tonight, David?
No.
Okay. Agenda item 5, announcements and student representative reports. Delaney and Cole. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you too.
So, as we all know, February break is coming up next week. We're all super excited for that. And today, South Burlington students left that were in the TIE program left for France today. And tomorrow night there will be a community dinner and dialogue about equity from 5:30 to 7 at the high school. And South Burlington's Student Justice Union is hosting a movie night, which will be screening Harriet at 6, also at the high school. And in elementary schools, congratulations to the youth inter-school cheerleading squad. The youth cheerleading team took first place in their cheerleading competition, which was held at South Burlington High School last week. They were coached by Lynn Kynock. Congratulations.
And then the voter registration drive was a huge success. We got 57 students registered to vote over the course of 2 days. So also, the annual Student Council blood drive was also a great success, collecting 31 units of blood yesterday. The Student Council promoted this drive as a pint for a pint, meaning for each pint of blood donated, the donor would receive a coupon for a free pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And there is an informational night for Grand Isle/Georgia families tonight at 7 at the high school. And the SBHS Varsity Pom dance team are once again state champions, defending their 4th year of the title. So in indoor track, Javin Sears, Quinn Pigeon, Ryan Steele, and Mike North were the state champions in the 4x400. Sierra Fisher was the state champ in the 1,000 meter. And Manel and Ryan Steele were the state champions in the triple jump. And then I was told by Miss Bushy that I had to say this. I was chosen to be part of the All Choir Directors Association Eastern Regional High School Honor Choir. Only 5 students in Vermont were accepted, and we leave the day after town meeting day to go to that in Rochester.
Congratulations.
That is all.
Wonderful. Are there any other announcements by anyone?
Cover a lot of the other pieces this week.
Okay. Then agenda item 6, city and school collaboration.
So last time we reported out, Elizabeth and I had met with Kevin Dorn and Helen, really. The next scheduled meeting for us is really March 2nd. And so I am trying to get some scheduled meetings with Kevin related to kind of looking at long-term plans. I think long-term planning, both city and school, primarily city, of what they have planned in the future. And again, I think we've heard from I've certainly heard from board members, and I've certainly heard from community around. That would be really helpful to be able to have a kind of a longer range plan around what is planned in the city and when. So,
David, can I report out one thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you well.
Great. We did get, first off, we both got copied on an email from Helen today. And one, I think we need to clarify when the next meeting is, because there's some confusion. It might be this Friday. But regardless, that she was looking for some potential representation from the school board or the school district on the domestic violence group that's working within the community and is supported by the city as well. So I just thought I'd highlight that at this point.
Yeah, so I have not read that email yet, Elizabeth, but I will respond, and I'll check in on the status of this Friday's meeting with both Helen or with Kevin, I should say.
Thanks.
Okay. If there's nothing else on city and school collaboration, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the superintendent's report.
So 2 of these are reoccurring. Rick Marcotte Central School, 180 Market Street, and the Chamberlin School noise mitigation.
Can you speak up, please?
Yeah, I'm usually pretty loud.
I don't know.
No, that's good. Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I get amplification to Elizabeth too, but is that better?
Yes.
So under my report, I have 3 items: Rick Marcotte Central School and 180 Market Street update. The second is the Chamberlin noise mitigation associated with the airport. And then third is a bus drivers and staffing update. And I'm happy to say I have Gary Marquis, our Director of Operations and Finance, because I'm going to ask him to give an update on all 3 of those. So welcome, Gary.
You're welcome. So the first item is the 180 Market Street. That project is still ahead of schedule. They had 2 sides of the foundation poured earlier in the week. While I was there, we did request, and they made improvements to the entrance road this week. I haven't been in since it's been completed, but I heard it is a lot better than it was. So that's good. Tough winter for road conditions, a lot of near freezing temperatures, so it freezes at night and thaws in the day, so pretty tough on the road. That's about it for the 180 Market Street project.
And just one other thing, though, it will be closed for a couple of days, right? Our
So
entrance.
it will not.
It won't?
It won't be closed. There will be 1-lane traffic the whole period of break, but they are going to dig across the entrance road. They're going to put some stormwater drainage in to get ahead of the spring work because they are a little ahead of schedule, and they'll keep 1 lane open the whole time. And that's going to happen Wednesday and Thursday of the next week. So on to the Chamberlin noise mitigation. On Thursday, I had the opportunity to meet with representatives from Vermont Gas, from Green Mountain Power, and Efficiency Vermont. We kind of validated LN's existing conditions and recommendations for a heating and cooling system at Rick Marcotte to be part of a potential FAA grant funded project.
Chamberlin, correct, Gary? I just wanted, you said Rick Marcotte, yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's all,
actually,
I know you just were on Rick
it's
Marcotte.
actually Chamberlin School.
Yes, thanks.
That we're talking about. But anyway, so we had a meeting. We validated the district's preferential choice of a water-sourced heat pump system that utilizes a on-site cooling tower for the cooling portion. We made that recommendation to the airport, to the airport recommendations to ask or to request that design work with a final cost, so we know what the local 10% match would be. The good news from between Vermont Gas, Green Mountain Power, and Efficiency Vermont, we're looking at about $100,000 of incentive money to go toward that 10% match just from those 3 entities. So I thought that was a very positive meeting, very collaborative. They fully supported our decision of which type of system to go with. So that's the Chamberlin School, not Rick Marcotte. That's the Chamberlin School.
Again, I don't know if any board members have any questions related to that. Again, we're giving you some updates here. Thank you, Gary.
And finally, you had asked for the current staffing situation for our transportation section. So at your places, I've broken down where we currently are, and I have some improvement strategy initiatives that we will be taking over the next several months to talk to you about. So right now we have 24 full-time CDL qualified drivers. 2 of those 24 are designated primarily to drive vans, but they have CDLs, so they have the versatility to drive trips or routes as needed. We have 1 full-time CDL trainee that is testing tomorrow, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. Not always easy. We have lots of folks have have to take a couple of temps, but we're hopeful that that David Winter will be qualified after tomorrow. We have 2 CDL qualified substitute drivers, 5 bus monitors, a transportation director who unfortunately is on extended leave since mid-December right now, so it's putting a little strain on the leadership team there in transportation. Our transportation coordinator is acting as the director currently. We have 1 fleet mechanic who replaced our longtime fleet mechanic who left late last school year, and he is working out tremendously, taking a lot of initiative, doing a great job. Hard to replace the person that we had, but we're super happy with the work that they're doing, really across the transportation department. We have a temporary advertisement out for administrative assistant, someone to help with phones and day-to-day coordination while the director is on extended leave. We haven't had any applications for that position yet. So if anybody out there is looking for some exciting, fun, temporary employment, we've got that opportunity. We currently have 30 buses and 2 vans in our fleet. They are all operational as of right now. Although I did hear the mechanic going out this afternoon on the radio, and I don't know what happened to that bus yet. So we've had some difficulties with resourcing really busy days and also having enough resources to adjust for absenteeism. We do have fairly high absentee rates within our driver population, and it's tough. We have to combine routes on many days. Causes some late buses, some difficult to communicate, like last minute changes to our normal schedule. That's tough on families. We absolutely recognize that. So we're working on a bunch of different initiatives to try to work through this and to improve the service portion of our transportation system. I'm actually pretty proud of what they're actually accomplishing, because this district has very high expectations, and we do transport a lot, and we're extremely accommodating to families as much as possible. So what my plan is, and I've talked to several drivers and the transportation director, going forward, I'm going to work with David in the Human Resources Department to propose adding 2 additional CDL drivers. I'm not sure if they're going to be just sub-drivers. That's something that we'll determine as we move forward. And then obviously our finance side will work on a plan to be able to support that to bring to you. We'll continue our current wage analysis and adjustments in collaboration with Human Resources to hopefully grow and improve our applicant pool. Starting back again on March 4th, we're going to fully implement our routing software to improve efficiencies for the upcoming school year. And we're going to keep looking at the structure of our leadership and our position descriptions in collaboration with HR to adapt to the increasing technology requirements that are coming in modern transportation systems. We'll explore the addition of limited on-call contracted resources for some of our most busy times. The height of our sports season, sometimes we have up to 8 or 9 co-curricular trips in a day. And the difficult part of that is they typically happen at the same time that our afternoon elementary and high middle runs happen. So it puts a pretty big strain on the system at those peak times. So I've talked to one of our local contractors about in high demand times would they have the flexibility to support a couple of co-curricular trips if we need to. I've also been working with David and our student activities director to explore implementing a daily ceiling for co-curricular through more detailed scheduling of our trips. Kind of.
And what that means is, again, it can, we love to support the programs that are going on, but there's a limit to complying with the elementary run, right? When a lot of the high middle kids are needing to go out. And so if you have too many trips, you can't meet your high middle load outbound, or you can't meet your high middle outbound homebound group either. So it poses a problem. And so again, it's wonderful that we have the groups, but if we're approaching, as Gary said, 7, 8 outbound trips, then it takes a lot of those buses out of it. So again, where do we set that ceiling? And again, we certainly recognize and want to support those opportunities, but maybe there's some more innovative ways around how we can do it.
Next, we're going to develop part of our routing software has a future capability of actually providing real-time information on the location of the bus and notifying how far a bus is away from a stop through like text messaging. That comes at a cost. We'll evaluate the cost of that in future years once we get the system fully implemented. In the meantime, we're working with our data folks in our IT department to use some of the PowerSchool features to be able to target specific buses that might be late. So if a combined route happens and somebody who is typically on bus number 7 is now on bus number 14, we're working to target and identify the families supported by that run that's affected and be able to PowerSchool messenger those families. And that's probably 60 to 90 days away from having that capability.
And what was the time frame, did you say, on the communications about where the bus is, the GPS or however it's driven?
That would be a future school year unless the
Sometime,
board authorizes some additional resources to be able to implement that in FY21.
Right.
And then finally, this was a great suggestion from one of our drivers. I was talking to him. I met with him last week about a couple of things that he'd been observing. This is his second school year driving. Real sharp guy, and we had a meeting, and I thought one of his ideas was scheduling a roundtable that involved students, parents, drivers, maybe a board member, administrator, to kind of have a round table and kind of brainstorm where our shortcomings are, potential solutions that don't just come from the transportation department, and to look at what our goals are for the future. Thought it was a great idea. I talked to David about implementing that, in the next 30 to 60 days to get that started. But that came from within the transportation department. I thought it was a terrific idea. So that's kind of our update for now. That's where we are. Have any questions? I'm happy to take them.
Well, just to say that if the roundtable thing does happen, and assuming I'm free, I'd be happy to be a part of that. If you want board representation, that'd be great.
I'll write your name down, Brian.
Yeah, man.
You're in.
You got it.
Excellent.
The only other thing is, this is not only a South Burlington related matter. I think as Gary can tell you, there's a lot of additional need even up and down the Champlain Valley. So as regional superintendents in the Champlain Valley, we've addressed some of the things that we could do in a more collaborative way. So again, Gary's engaged in this with me as well, but we're trying to talk about, or we'll be talking about what are some kind of the continuation of a roundtable conversation with our wider area. Again, to Gary's point, if you look at where all of the buses are going, there may be some efficiencies that can be rendered when there's a bus that's from another location for another school, but it's going right to the same location. So can we recognize some efficiencies? Again, I think to Gary's point, we've got to get some of the back end work done and get some of that data collected before we can know where to go next. But again, part of our work around the Champlain Valley, at least, is to look at what are some efficiencies that we can render and in what areas. And it may be special education, it may be transportation, and which one, has probably the best return on our investment and time. And so this is one of them that we're going to explore.
I guess that was a question for me. I've asked this question before. How are Winooski contracts sort of factors into all of this? Are the drivers that take care of that part of this, list roster of staff people?
They're both sub-drivers.
They're both sub-drivers?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah, and so just to highlight the Winooski, I mean, our kids are currently, we do provide through contracted, and they pay for this, and it's only in the morning for Winooski. Winooski had a high rate of absenteeism in the morning because kids were not getting there, obviously for a multitude of reasons, and so they had put out a bid and no return on that bid because it was a fairly small ask, really. But we have 2 drivers that drive the morning, and then they're back in play for either a midday or afternoon run.
So they're not, so Winooski kids just get rides home or they walk home in the afternoon?
Currently, that's correct. We're unsure about whether, the condition of that contract on a going forward basis, but that has been revenue that's come in. And those of you who know, the distance from our transportation office to Winooski is very, very close.
Very close.
Actually closer to Winooski than it is to Orchard,
yeah.
for instance, so just put that in perspective. So again, this was an example of collaboration in transportation, so I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Are there other board questions?
I'm all set.
Okay. Any questions from the community on that one? Okay. That brings us to agenda item 8, which is master planning and visioning update. So I don't think there is a whole lot of update other than to say we've had our community information sessions. We will have a official bond hearing on March 2nd, as is required on town meeting day. So we will be talking to the public about it one more time there. As of right now, we don't have any other sort of broad-ranging community information evenings or anything like that. So people with questions should email them to the board or reach out by phone to ask questions leading up to town meeting day. David, did you have anything to add on master planning and visioning?
No, I think that's good. We have been responding, Gary and myself, and have been responding to we've had some requests come in, public records requests come in. We've been trying to be diligent around those responses, and we'll continue to do so. But you're right on. We're available for phone calls and questions or stop-ins. I've had some nice opportunities to visit with some folks as well. And again, March 2nd is coming up.
Yep, so that's March 2nd, 7 p.m. Across the hall from here. So the whole town meeting information night starts at 7 in the middle school cafeteria.
Yeah, and I do want to just highlight that because I did get the schedule, Bridget.
Sure.
And actually I have copies for folks, but the schedule for the 2nd is at 7 o'clock. Sorry, can people hear all right? At 7 o'clock is city budget presentation and discussion. At 7:30 will be the school budget and discussion up until 8:15. And so we'll also include in that 45 minutes, which is longer than we thought, which we're happy about, would be an update on the master planning and visioning and budget. We're not exactly sure how the time amount will be there, and then at 8:30 will be the school board candidate forum at 8:30.
You left out the 8:15. At
Oh, I'm sorry.
8:15 are the
City
city
council
council
forum, yep.
candidate. Yep.
Yep.
Forum.
So that's that.
That's the schedule for that night. Okay.
I know last year Arnell and I went to RETN to do a TV thing. Is that happening again this year, or?
So the TV,
It's already been done.
It's already been done.
It's
There
already
you go.
been done.
It happened
Yes.
quick. So yes, we thought about bringing you in, but it was also pretty short notice.
That's okay.
And we did the budget and master planning all kind of in one.
And we should say that those links are still available on RETN. So they can, I think the links are up on our school board webpage, or not school board, school district webpage, as well as at the RETN site. If you go and search for South Burlington, they will have videos that they've taken of regular school board meetings, but also that actually wasn't RETN. It was Channel 17.
Yeah, I know.
So
Good,
Channel
you caught it.
17, though, the same thing. Channel 17 does have links to all of those from around Champlain Valley, but in particular, ours are still up there. There was a separate one on the bond and the budget on the same night, so about half an hour on each. Yeah. All right, any other board questions? Nope.
Nope.
Okay, I believe that Gary has a speakers list. Gary, do you want to just sort of call people up off
Yeah.
of that list?
Yeah.
We know there's only maybe a couple, but.
That's you, sir.
Hi, Jay.
How you doing?
Good. Good to see you.
It's frightening. I haven't been in school and,
Oh, come on, it's not that long ago.
yeah, it has actually, 16 years.
Yeah.
16 years.
Could you just tell us your name?
Yeah, Jay Zeitz. I live down in Country Club Estates Development. I've been a resident for 48 years. And I'm come to speak to you to tell you the truth. This new bond that you folks have developed are going to put me out of business. And it's going to put a lot of people in South Burlington in the same position that I'm in now. I will tell you right now, I envision that this vote on this bond will be turned down. And I'm very upset that this kind of money is going to be spent. First thing I'd like to ask the board is how much money have you folks spent in just setting this up? All the architectural, all the advertising, everything. How much money has been spent by the school district, and where did the money come from?
So the board, remember, in the budget that we are currently living under,
Right.
we did not know the direction that the board wanted to take, so there was nothing in it. We went out and got a $350,000 line of credit to allow for the work to continue around the architectural work, also the financial advisement that we needed from professional, and some communication help. We know one of the main things, so there's a 350 line of credit.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. So there's a $350,000 line of credit that we took out.
Yeah.
We have not spent that, but we know that we needed to be transparent because we did not have that money in the budget. And so that was a publicly warned process, and the board approved that. And obviously, if the budget passes, the bond would repay that portion through the bond proceeds.
Right.
If it does not pass, then we have the line of credit that we would use to repay that if we need to. Again, as you know, we run a $50 million budget. If we don't need to use the line of credit, then we won't. But that's part of being, again, transparent with folks around that. Now, as far as to date, I don't have an actual number to date of what we've spent. I know that there's been, Gary has been responding to that. I don't know that you have an exact number, Gary. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't have an exact number. I mean, I can give you a rough estimate.
Okay.
So we're working through that, and every bit is, again, transparent about, what we spent. Again, when we get the bills in, we pay them,
Right.
and in some cases, we'll continue to keep that updated.
My concern with it is I'm seeing signs out on the roadway, which is fine. It says, vote yes for the bond. And if the taxpayers' money is using that some of us taxpayers want to put a no on that sign.
Yeah, there's nothing coming from the district on any signage
Okay.
currently,
All
no.
right.
Where is it coming from?
It's coming from a political action committee. That's what we know. We also know that there's a political action committee on the other side, which is, for us, that's something that has happened in this community on several occasions.
All right. Last question. You tuition about 170 students from the islands. And I know from hearsay that money is being made off these students, which is fine, okay? Are we obligated to educate those 170 kids? Because the question basically comes down to this. One of the reasons that you want to redo the high school is to have more space. Well, you take 170 kids out of that high school and give our kids of South Burlington the room that is required, then you'd have the room. The bottom line is, if we're not obligated to take these kids, then why do it other than making money? And that's not an excuse. If you're making money off these kids, good. But the problem being is they're taking up space in our high school, which our kids are required, our budgets pay for. And if they're not getting the equal amount of space they should be, I would hope they'd have the same space that my kids had when they went to school here. So I see this as, yeah, tuition is fine and making money, but cramped quarters over at the high school. You take 170 kids out of this equation, you have the space, less staff, less wear and tear on the building. That's all I have to say.
So a quick response for you, Jay.
Yeah.
Yes, we have tuition students. That varies between 170 and 180, and it has for many years, even the years I'm sure when your students were here, we had tuition students. So they've been a big part of our programming. They've allowed us to do and provide a lot of academic programs that if we did not have the $2.8 million coming in, we would not. Most importantly, we really benefit, our students do, from the collaboration that we have with the diverse population of students that feed that. And again, we have one of our student board reps here is one of them. And we have many great examples students that have benefited both from our program. But I want to be clear that capacity is only one item, right? Capacity is only one item. Even if we take the students out, we still have major issues that we need to address. We need to address the electrical related issues. We need to address the mechanical functionality. Those don't go away when you take the students away, right? Even with the current capacity that we have of our resident students, as we continue into the next 10 years, our tuition or our enrollment, resident enrollment, continues to climb, and we're right in the same situation. The current spaces, again, if you've been to the high school, and again, tours are open, but where we've had the meeting in CAF 2, which is our largest space, is significantly undersized, right? Even with CAF 1 and the lobby spaces, it's just not enough space to provide that. It was inadequate even when it was built for the population that we serve. The gym, for instance, is still an issue that needs to be resolved. So you need to be clear about capacity is really only one of the many issues.
Yeah, but it's a big one.
Well,
and it's taken away from students here who go to school.
But remember,
here.
if you take the students out, you still have the issues that are identified in those infrastructure things regardless, right? And it's a big part of the equation, those other components. And the revenue that they bring in is an important component. Again, most importantly, again, I want to speak on behalf of students, it's really important of what they bring into our community with the richness of their experience and their opportunities to exchange and our opportunities to also have what we have.
I also wanted, if I could, sir, I wanted to add a wrinkle about the money that has been spent up front already. Yeah. And we do have, I should point out, Rob Fitzgerald and Lee Dorr from Dorr and Whittier Architects here, if there are any specific questions. But I think part of the reason we're positioned where we are with this project is because of the work that was done ahead of time. We got as far as schematic drawings, which means we do not anticipate surprises if this project goes forward, whereas Burlington did not go as far. And all of a sudden their $70 million they bonded for isn't going to be enough. So, and the other thing to point out, I really believe in this project and hope it goes forward. Should it fail, we'll have to get back together and figure out what we're going to do, and that information is still going to inform whatever choice that is. So it's not like the money's flushed.
Right. I know Dorr Whittier is a good company. They volunteered and helped with that Veterans Memorial up at the park and so forth. And Lee was our paper boy one. Never missed a day.
That's a good wrinkle, too.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Brown. I'm new to the area. I moved here about 2 years ago with my wife. And, you know, coming from an outsider's perspective here, obviously a lot of questions about the capital expenditure here. You know, when we made the decision to move here, we took a look at the way that revenue was raised, and, you know, the property tax is one of the highest in the country. And I just want to, as a suggestion, I would like to say, we're running out of time here before this thing goes to a vote, but, I spend probably 30 minutes, hour a week, whatever, watching the news, reading, trying to make an informed decision on this project. And it's still a little unclear to me if there has truly been an unbiased and impartial look at this thing from the end of the process, right? You guys spent what you spent, and now the decision is either to renovate or to go with the new capital expenditure. If there is a true unbiased party that's taking a look at that, preferably somebody from out of town, somebody that, nobody can argue that they can stand to benefit in any way from this project. I think you guys should put that on the front page of the paper like tomorrow. That's a suggestion. Now, a question, I guess, is when we're talking about the how the tax burden is going to be shifted to people on an individual basis. I think we're lacking a little bit of candor if we just don't address that and we just say, that's too complicated to figure out, so we're just not even going to talk about it. It's similar to the interest rate not being included on the ballot, right? Well, we can't figure that out, so we're just going to mark it as zero. That's lacking candor, and that's a little dishonest. So what I would propose is like come up with maybe 10 scenarios of people that are on different, financial circumstances. Somebody with higher income, somebody with a bunch of capital gains, somebody that's living off of IRA money, somebody that has a bunch of equity in their home, so that we can kind of pick our closest match as residents and have an informed decision. We don't expect you guys to break it all down for us like our personal accountant and say this is exactly what you should owe. But if we can get a close comp, I think that would be beneficial. And this is maybe going a little bit too far, but it's not out of the question when we talk about an ask from politicians, right? I would like to know your own financial commitment to this project, your own your tax returns, the equity you have in your property, those kinds of things would be nice to know, just to be upfront. Please.
I don't mind sharing that. I will. My house is on the grand list at about $246,000. I owe about $160,000 on it, and I estimate that I'm going to spend, if this bond passes, about $1,300 or $1,400 extra per year for the life of the bond. And I also have some credit card debt that I'm working to pay off. That was my New Year's resolution, to pay off that credit card debt, and I'm getting there. And so, in terms of affecting me, I have a kid who's an 8th grader right now. So for his freshman, sophomore, junior, and part of his senior year, he's going to have no athletic fields for his time in high school. I also have a 6th grader who, for his freshman and most of his sophomore year, is going to have no athletic fields through his time in high school. So I think for my family, it's a net negative. Even, if I had 4th and 5th graders, great. They'd have this sparkling new building. As soon as it opened, they'd move in. But, the way in my family, as soon as it opens, we graduate. So personally, I don't benefit. My family doesn't benefit.
Yeah,
I appreciate. I think it's great that you all are willing to share that.
So I think that's actually an irrelevant question. I'm on here not making decisions of what works best for me. I'm on the board to try to figure out what's best for the school district and for the community. So it's really not relevant what the answer to that question is.
I would argue, sir, that it goes to show real or perceived conflict of interest or bias.
Well, conflict of interest is a whole different animal. Let's make that very clear. If I had a construction company that was going to come in here and make some money from this, that'd be a conflict of interest.
Okay, so bias.
The bias.
Who's going to be stuck holding the heaviest bags on this project? That's what I want to know. The majority of these folks here, they're retired and they're going to be on fixed incomes, right?
I understand that, but you're missing.
That's different from my.
Right, you're missing the point. That's not why I'm on here. It's not why I'm on the board, and it's to put this before the community, for the community to decide if what we're presenting, what our experts have said, is the appropriate path forward for the community, if the community thinks it's worth that price. And that's what the point is. I can tell you that I'm not going to have kids in the school, and I'm going to have a significant increase in my property taxes. That's all I'll tell you. I mean, but I think that that's not relevant to the point of why we're putting this before the community.
Fair enough, sir.
So,
again, I just threw that last piece in there. If you felt comfortable, like the gentleman over here, to share, I think that would go a long way towards giving you some credibility to the voters and the residents. But what I would like to see is like 10 hypothetical scenarios, fake people, fake income situations.
Have you seen our grid? We have a grid with much more than 10 scenarios in which you can look up your house value. You look and if you're income sensitized, you can look up your income value, and that's your estimated tax bill. Do you have that, Gary? Can we get that out?
But
We do.
Okay, so it's on our website.
Like we have 20,000 residents in South Burlington, right? Like to know like who's going to be stuck with the heaviest bag here. That's the question.
Yeah.
Well, you look up on the chart, and your everybody's number is going to be somewhere between one and the other. So if your income is, $43,000, and we have and it's, I don't know what the chart says, $40,000 and $45,000, you're going to have to do what they teach in high school math called interpolation. So that's what you can do, and you can get a good estimate of it. And it's not deceptive. It's not forthright or anything like that. It's very forthright. We're giving it for everybody, and anybody can look up the best estimate for what their tax is going to be.
Okay.
So I want to just, again, thanks for coming. Thanks for asking the question first. I wanted to get back. You did ask about process, and that was one of your first things, process, and then kind of the helping with the complication of understanding what this means, on the tax for each individual. As far as the process, again, I know that you've spent some time and you probably have seen it. The board has been at it for a long time, and it's delineated around the options that have been explored all the way from phase one, looking at kind of major systems and walking through a variety of options. Again, this board and I think many of the administration were not in a place where we are today. They never felt that was probably going to be the likely path. But as a result of the process and determining the amount of need and the cost of the need and the disruption is what led the board, again, I have to say, led the board to their decision around moving forward to the option that's there. So, and I would be happy to meet with you to share with you some of the processes that have unfolded over the course of the last several years. Helpful, I think. And again, if you don't see that or have not been a part of that, it's easy to say, how did you get here, right? Yeah. I get it. And so I wanted to say that. As far as the cost-related matters, one of the things we recognize and we've said is not to be deceiving, but we have been able to give some general implications. Gary has with our financial advisors on kind of the home value, right? But when you get into some of the specifics around what will this cost me on the income sensitivity, we've been careful to not get too deep in that because we don't know a lot about what an individual or a household might have for taxes that they owe in the previous year. There's all kinds of indicators, 25 several components that you got to go through in order to get at that. And so we've been pretty general, and I think that general piece has brought up some concern to folks. And we've typically said you need to go to the various tax information to try to figure that out a little bit more deeply if you do have questions about that. So it gets in kind of to your point around digging in a little bit more deeply about your current financial conditions. And again, a lot of that we don't have on an entire community, obviously, to be able to depict that.
I hear you. And I appreciate the work you all are doing here. It just some of the things that are definitely questions in my mind. What I have seen and whatever I've picked up on this has been what is it, $350,000 house, you're going to pay $1,500 more a year, And
Yeah.
On average, over 32 years. So the schedule
Higher
that's on the
years.
website
Yeah.
shows how it ramps up for the first 4 years and then slowly ramps down over time. But the average over those 32 years is $1,500. That's if you do not qualify for any income sensitivity or any kind of credit.
Jeremy, have you seen that website?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
just-
have
I
you seen the
just-
chart
yeah,
that I'm
no,
talking about?
He says
I
he
have
has.
seen the chart.
Yeah, I
Okay,
just
good.
wanted
Yeah.
to say that I just wanted to address again, and we've addressed it in previous board meetings, the decision to put 209.6 on the ballot, or the full amount that is the capital that we're taking out. That is what is expected when you take out a bond in Vermont. We had legal advice, and we added in, because of feedback, the clause that says this doesn't include interest. But because we don't even know what the bonding schedule will end up being, we've done the best scenario that we can with our financial advisor. They gave us several scenarios. We worked with them to choose one that was probably going to be realistic. And then we made our best assumptions about what different interest rates could be over 4 different years or 4 different bonds. And so to put that kind of information on the ballot is just, it's just not what legally we're allowed to do, because we just don't have insight on that. So we've been upfront that the taxpayer impact that we're calculating uses a scenario. There have been, there are footnotes on the charts about what the assumptions are. There have been footnotes, not footnotes, there have been bullet points in our presentations saying this is the bonding schedule that we're using as a scenario to estimate what that interest is going to be on the bond. We've tried to be as clear as we can, but we can't legally put that on the ballot as a total amount, because then we end up further down the road with the project, which we know is going to cost somewhere in the 209.6 neighborhood. And if we bump up against that, and we're in the middle of the project and we're taking out our 4th bond and the interest rate is different, then we're stuck. We're 3 years down the road of a project and then can't finish it. So we have to just be very careful to follow the letter of the law about what we can put on the ballot.
Appreciate that.
Also, just in the spirit of your openness question, I would follow Alex and say my wife and I both work for the university, so our salaries are a matter of public record. So I'm a secretary there. I make $25,000-ish. She's a professor of Russian language and literature and makes about $80,000-ish. We're like half of the town, and I suppose Alex, who are income sensitized. My tax bill last year would have been $5,900, but I was income sensitized, so it got taken down to $3,600. This project will likely add about 20% if you sort of squint your eyes to my annual tax bill. But in the spirit of what Martin was saying, none of that weighed into my decision. I have a 9th grader at the high school. I have a 5th grader at Orchard. My daughter will see some benefit from this moving into a new high school sometime during her freshman year. Her middle school experience will be totally disrupted. My son will see no benefit. He's a track athlete. He will suddenly not have access to the track. None of that weighed into my decision. It was absolutely not about my kids or about me.
None of that consciously weighed into your decision.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, you're
and
right.
also for the perception of for us, I mean, we just, we'd love to take your word at it, but
I'm trying to be as open as I can, and I have to say with the process too. I mean, people like Gary Marcus are saying, "Oh my goodness, we're putting out so much information." Compared to Burlington and Winooski, I think that's true. I think in some minds there's this idea of like the smoke-filled back room or something, and I've tried to make a point of doing everything in the broad daylight, and this is in that spirit as well.
Appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
welcome
Jeremy.
to the community.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
welcome.
yeah.
Hello.
My name's Annie Loop, and I'm here to say that I simply can't afford it. I've been in this South Burlington. 3 of my kids went to school here right through, all 12 years each, and actually they're horrified as well for me, because I can't afford to live here anymore if you do this and tag every penny is going to the taxpayers, and that's just not fair. I feel as if maybe you didn't do the due diligence that you should have through the years. When you started thinking about this years and years ago, as you said the other night, I forgot your name.
Bridget?
Bridget, sorry, I knew it was Burkhardt. You indicated that this has been on the back burner and been rolling around since 2008, and then in 2018 you just started ramping up, and things, a lot of things came along. But from my point of view, I don't think of it as $209,000. It's $345,000 if you put in a normal interest rate. So we're talking, and probably most of the audience here is talking about $345 million. And that price tag is going to go to 7,500 residences. That's not very much. When you do that math, if you want to do that math, that comes to $46,000 per residence in this small city. And that you mentioned, $43,000 or something. $46,000 is an entire year of someone's salary. Probably the majority of this city, they have about that much, in income, if that. So much of the city is income sensitized. Some are, some aren't. But to think that that each residence is going to have the ball and chain around their necks, around each house is going to have to devote at least that amount in order to pay $345 million over the course of the next 32 years. I just can't see that as a reasonable thing. Now, I don't know why you didn't do what other schools do. I mean, I'm thinking of, say, a prep school or something. They go out and they ask alumni for money. Hey, they get millions of dollars a year from their alumni. Why can't you do that? I bet you my kids would be willing to give you money for that. Just send out letters and say, hey, why don't, I'd like as a, I'd like to pay money as an alumni. I've been paying at times for my high school that I graduated, I won't even say how long ago. If they need money for capital purposes, I'm willing to give money for that. But there's other methods of getting money besides strictly from the taxpayers. All 7,500 residences in this tiny town. You only recently started calling it a city. It's always been a town. I want to see if there's something else I wanted to mention. It kind of aggravates me. I do think some of you mentioned the athletic fields, that your kids aren't even going to have the athletic fields. Why did we spend all that money for the athletic fields very recently, to have them all great and wonderful in the bathrooms and everything? Why in the world would we be tearing those apart when we haven't even finished paying for them yet? What sort of waste is that? Why are you, look at this school, this school and the high school. To me, they're in beautiful shape. I think they're in better shape than they were when my kids were going to school. There's nothing more than you mentioned electricity and some of the other things. There's plenty to do. Sure, $50 million, $40 million, whatever it takes, fix them up, refurbish them, and allow these buildings to stand. And then maybe someday when you get more money, then get your nice shiny building that's going to take $345 million, but maybe not from the 7,500 residences that are here in South Burlington right now.
Thank you, Annie.
Now, I have, after the next person talks, I believe that more people came in, they may have the opportunity to talk.
Oh, sure.
And also, I feel as if a lot of the people that are sitting here right now would like to ask questions. Maybe just one question, maybe not sit here. I don't really enjoy sitting here and talking to you guys. I didn't know that this was going to be the forum, but this is what's coming through my head at the moment. If I knew that I was going to be sitting here, I would have a list about this long to be saying exactly what I think. But there's a lot of people behind me. I suspect after the next person talks, we'll be willing to ask more questions, and I hope that you'll each be available and willing to answer their questions. A lot of us spent our night coming out here rather than something else we might have rather to do, and the fact that you're making everybody sit here and put down that they want to speak to you is a little intimidating for some of us.
Well, Annie, thanks again. You've come out to a lot of events, so first and foremost, thanks for being a community member and listening. We're trying to do it in a way where people can be heard, and again, sometimes amplification and sound is important, so we're not trying to create an uncomfortable environment, but wanting to make sure people can be heard. I do want to do a quick response around at least three of the things you said, and again, what I heard was due diligence. And I think that we are here because of a board that has done their due diligence. They did not begin thinking that this is where we would be. And as a result of a long delineated process that you can see, brought them to where we are today. I do think that many other communities, and I don't want to name some of our near neighbors, but I think there have been short-sighted around doing what we would say the renovation only. The worry about renovation only is likely going to result, from my perspective, in doing something today or whenever you can do it, and very soon thereafter, and I'm going to say soon thereafter would be in a 10-year period of having to do something else. And I think this board looked at and sought professional expertise around what would be the long-term plan. And the reality is, whether it's $5 million today, 5 more years from now, continues to have those costs climb exorbitantly. And looking at a 5% construction increase and labor increase was a big part of that due diligence. So looking at those, we know from our near neighbors, they're likely going to need to go out and do something in the very near future. They'll reach costs that will far exceed where we are in the very near future. So again, due diligence, I think, albeit the price tag is big, but due diligence was absolutely done. As far as the alumni, we have been successful in receiving alumni money from folks. But one of the things you don't do is you don't go out initially and try to get that. We will, if this is approved, go out and find out whether or not they want to have give some money to this particular cause. Could be a naming of a facility, could be naming of a certain room, could be naming of an auditorium. But again, we don't necessarily know what that will be. We will ask, and that may have a significant effect, or an effect, I don't want to say significant, but it may have an effect like we did when we did the first turf field with Mr. Munson. Unfortunately, he's no longer around. Give us about $1 million to do the turf field. And again, that will be certainly one of the actions that we would take. And then thirdly, you brought up the athletic fields. One of the guiding principles that this board had was to try not to disrupt what's currently here. One of the areas was the athletic facility, and the other was kind of our green space in the very front of Dorset Street. Unfortunately, when the due diligence was unfolding, it did not make sense for them to say we should try to preserve that. Now, one of the things out of this is to try to preserve the facilities, the buildings that are there, if we can, the concession stand, the team room and bathrooms, and the light poles. The light poles actually sit on concrete cylinders, and they can be moved. Again, so that's part of the conversation, so there's not a net loss. The turf field that went in before, it's a 10-year lifespan on them. We got 12 years out of the first one, and we'll be about 4 years into the second. So you're right, it won't get to its full useful life, and that's problematic. But in all of the cost-benefit factors, that was weighed in to the due diligence that the board recognized. I know you have a lot more questions, and again, we want to be open to them. And I know, again, you've been really great about coming to meetings and asking questions, and we do appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let me ask you one more, since you mentioned the alumni. What would that do for all the taxpayers in this city?
So again, I don't want to forecast an exorbitant number of alumni that would come forward, but if they did, let's just say somebody came forward, then on the bonding disbursement, remember you heard Bridget or you've heard Gary maybe talk about the bonding, the first phase bonding, the second phase bonding, the third phase bonding. Obviously, when we got to the second or the third, depending on when that money would come in, it would diminish the amount of money that we would need to go out and bond for it. So it would have an effect on the end cost to the taxpayers. Again, but I think it's important not to overpromise.
No.
I have had conversations with some folks in the community that would like to perhaps consider putting a name on a space, but we've gone no further than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope that would be what you would do with the $55 million renovation, is go out and get it, and so that the taxpayers don't get impacted to such a degree, even with the 55, did I say $1,000 million?
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Sometimes the 55, again, depending, I don't want to get too defensive, but, that sometimes when it's only dealing with, electrical room, or an HVAC upgrades, those things, naming those things are not as desirable as naming a space, you know what I mean? And so that's a little bit different of a funding mechanism. Not to say that people wouldn't give into the HVAC mechanical ADA compliance. They may, if it's something different. But again, we have an active alumni group, and they've been really helpful, and we would take advantage of that. Again, I don't want to overpromise what might come of that.
right.
Yeah. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you. Please open it up for other questions.
After the last speaker,
they'll
of
probably
course.
be
Yes.
small.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Annie.
Gary, is there another speaker on the list?
Yeah, come on up.
I'll go last. Grand finale.
Hello,
Hey, hi.
I'm Kathy Easton.
Kathy,
I live in the district, and in the interest of disclosure, I will tell you, politically, I am an independent. I'm a moderate. I tend to go right down the middle. But overall, I would say that I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't like debt. I don't like the federal government having such a heavy debt. I'm very concerned about our state. I read as many reports as I can about the state of our schools. Martin serves on committees, and he surely knows that we've got a problem in our state. But we recently saw the mailing that was sent out urging people to vote yes, and they use words like they're nearing the end of their useful lives, they're plagued with problems. And I brought this up before because you had your accreditation report, and nobody was running out into the street asking the accreditation team, look again, please, our school is about to fall down. All of the reports were good, and I agree with David that they did suggest that some changes had to be made. But I think a lot of people are truly, genuinely very concerned about whether they can afford to stay here. And I think they've appreciated the opportunities that you opened up your meetings to allow people to have exchanges with you. Now, whether this bond will go through, I don't know. But we will still be a community afterward. And sort of as a cautionary tale, I just want to share with you something I found in my recent research. And this is from June 24th, 2019, so it's not that old. And it's from a school district in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania. It's about 3,400 students, so it's not that far off of ours. And I just want to read a little bit of this to you. It's hard to overstate the colossal financial challenges facing the Penn Hill School District. Decisions surrounding the construction of 2 state-of-the-art schools a decade ago haunt the district as enrollment declines and staggering debt threatens its future. The district is burdened with more than $170 million in debt, leaning on a tax base saddled with what already is among the region's highest property tax rates. An Allegheny County grand jury investigating the district's financial collapse found that the construction project's the root of the turmoil thrust the district into a financial tailspin. So the State Department of Education placed the school system in financial recovery status, and that they say is a distinction reserved only for a handful of severely cash-strapped schools. But the problem is, as somebody else noted, and this is a person from the University of Pittsburgh, in this case, the schools have already been built and renovated, and the contractors have all been paid. It's not like a pair of shoes. There's no giving it back. The debts have been incurred. And I guess in my mind, where I am vehemently opposed to incurring debts that you can't possibly keep up with, I would hate to see our community facing unmanageable expenditures in the future in which we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if there are going to be recessions. We don't know if somehow our district will end up doing beautifully. But one of the last things that they said in the article that I think was very important is Mr. Matsuk, who was appointed the receiver for all intents and purposes, says he's been getting a lot of feedback, and he said that that input really matters because then the community remains engaged. And he said what happened in the past, people stopped paying attention. And when you stop paying attention, things like that happen. It's important going forward that people watch the decisions being made and how they are made. We have to make a commitment that things are done the right way moving forward. And I truly believe that you're people of goodwill, and you do the community a great service by being here. And I don't know what will happen with this vote. But we will still have to work together. And if the vote is no, I hope you will genuinely, there was a prior vote where somebody said, oh, we must have just not explained it well enough. They didn't understand. Well, just people understand real well. So we hope that if it's no, that we can all work together to find something that people feel that they can truly afford. So I'm sorry to go on, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
So, Dan Emmons, most of you know me. In answer to Jay's question regarding how much has been spent, I'm actually quite surprised that nobody sitting here in front of us right now could answer the question, and nor could Gary. And as you know, yes, I've been asking the questions on how much money has been spent so far in getting to where we are today. That total number is $272,464. Doran Whittier has been paid $235,032. Juniper Marketing and Communications, $19,026. PC Construction, $14,750. RETN, $2,000, and the other paper, $1,656. So just for, that's transparency. That's so everybody knows exactly how much has been spent to get us where we are.
Dan, you're including money from 2018 and 19 to Doran Whittier.
Okay, well, that was, there was a contract that was signed for $300,000 limit, is what I'm assuming that meant?
For 2020.
Yep. Important to note, Dan,
so regardless,
that the board,
that's what's been spent, regardless whether it was this year or last, whenever. That is how much has been spent to date.
Yep, thank you. Transparency has always been in the forefront, and again, all of our information is available. Doran Whittier has been working with us. They won the bid. We've bid out the processes in a very transparent way, following all of the guidelines.
Okay.
And in our previous budgets, yes, we've used them as we've worked to try to figure out, again, due diligence through process to figure out where to go. So absolutely. Yep.
Just, a question that comes to my mind, and at any point during this process, when you saw the price tag and you saw the tax implications on the community and the potential drain on the ed fund by literally by basically looking and saying, well, because of income sensitivity, the state will pay for it. So therefore, there's a continued drain on the state ed fund. Now, I think that that's an irresponsible statement to make to a community and to a state who is struggling with their ed fund, that you know it, as far as you know. But at any point did you say, whoa, this is really too much. We really should not burden this community with this. At any point, did anybody think that, or was it just the big shiny goal?
No,
I think we all thought that.
The way.
You know? I mean...
I think, Dan, again, I'm going to go back to process. The board's been at this a long time, and some of you who are in the room have seen that process unfold. The board members that sit before you today, and many of those that have been here before them, have been through the process, and I think it's, again, the due diligence, albeit it's a big price tag, but I think what we're understanding is that the issues before us, and again, some of us know some other pending smaller schools that are looking at significant, needs for their facilities in the vicinity of 50 million or more for very, very small schools. It's because schools were built in the 50s and 60s, and we've done nothing to them. We in this district, as folks have said, we've worked hard, and Gary and his team have worked hard to do the things that we need to do, but we can't do the big items. And those big items are the systems that we've mentioned. You can't reconstruct ADA block walls, you can't simply go in and quickly replace the electrical systems, right? 4,000 amp services with pump switch gears. You can't just go in and do those. We have 8 weeks to do that work. So all of that factored in, all of the complexities of that, and then to walk down either a $55 million or $130 million was not, from their perspective, what they've shared, was not responsible. It was not responsible. And again, I think we are very observant of the ed fund and the condition of the ed fund. Again, I've been in the business now, it's hard to believe, but 30 years. And I have been at it for at least 20 years, talking about needing to put some dollars away. Some people in the room, I've talked to about this at length, that the state needed to be putting money away long ago, so that we don't have these major burdens. Unfortunately, we've got to figure out how to move forward. This board is trying to be diligent so that we don't come back in 10 years, like I think others are going to need to, and say, oop, we need a little bit more. Oop, we made a wrong decision. And that 55, or whatever their amount is, or the 80 or 60, now translates into something significantly more. So we definitely know. Again, I want to just speak to the diligence of the board, and they have been at it. Again, I can speak to two of them and one on the phone that has been at it for a long time, and then the other two joining have been really, I think, really diligent in their analysis. Again, I think in the administration, from my perspective, when we started, we would have said, I think we're going to renovation. But as a result of the professional work that's been done and the information, it certainly, again, I think is where we are today. So,
I think a lot of people in the community also think that this district has a very serious spending addiction. We're looking at we continue to look at some of these large increases. Obviously, we need to increase. We need to fix the buildings, or as you want to do, tear them down and build new. We continue to see these budgets go up and up. We're looking at 11.2% increase in taxes this year. That's not even really hardly being mentioned. Everybody's so concerned about this bond that they're kind of that's getting kind of pushed to the side. Yeah. We're going to see those. How long are we going to keep seeing those increases on top of the additional $150 a month or $1,500 a year that a lot of people are going to see? They're going to reach that cap for that income sensitivity, and they're still going to be on the line for all that. Yeah. So it's a snowball rolling down a hill. I mean, this is just never going to stop, and we will be in the same situation as the Pennsylvania district that was just spoken about.
So I think two things to say. One, about the jump in the annual budget this year. It is large, but the 5-year average is more like 4%, and the 10-year average is more like 3%. And part of the reason that this year is so big is due to state-level factors that we cannot control, like changes in the common level of appraisal. So that's one thing. The other thing, to get back to your question about the money that was spent ahead of time, I'm really glad we spent that money, because thanks to the work of Dora and Whittier, we are not going to find ourselves in the place of a Burlington when we actually get to put the shovels in the ground. Thanks to the work of PC Construction, we had their cost vetted, and so that we know we're not going to come in above 209, 588, 828. And thanks to the work of Juniper, we are helping to get the word out to people like Kathy Eastie was talking about. So thank heavens we spent all that money, is my opinion.
Well, that's...
I disagree.
There's
my logic.
I'm just dumbfounded, by the
But
logic.
back to the budget concerns, and I do hear the concern about the budget. The board raised eyebrows when the budget was brought to us, and we definitely pushed back on every line and understand where it's coming from. I do want to point out that for this school year, the one that we're currently in, our tax rate is the same as it was in 2015. So I hear you. I know expenses and within the district are going up. But in terms of our tax rate, it has been essentially flat for 4 to 5 years. We know this is a big jump. We don't take that lightly. But we are in a situation where we're seeing increased enrollment. And the state, in terms of its funding formula, doesn't give us credit for that jump in enrollment all in 1 year. So it's on an annual or a 2-year average basis. So basically, we've seen a jump of 70 students in the district, or that's what we're projecting for next year, given what we've seen come into the district in this school year, plus what we're expecting to add to that. And we have to be ready for that. We have to be ready for that with the right staff. We have to be ready for that with things like, roof repairs at the elementary schools that are seeing some of those increases in enrollment. And so as the district grows, there will be increases, and we're watching as carefully as we can. But to say no to, security staff, to make sure that we have a security person at each of the elementary schools, to say no to new teachers at Rick Marcotte and at Chamberlin and at Orchard, when we're having parents come to board meetings and say, my kid's class at Rick Marcotte right now is already overcrowded, and they're bursting at the seams, and they're not getting as much out of their year as they should because the teacher is overwhelmed. We have to be responsive to that. And we don't take it lightly when we ask the community for things. We really don't. So I take the feedback, and I appreciate it.
Again, those are factors that I think, the board asks a lot of the administration. I think it's important to you to know, as Bridget said, we have increasing enrollment. That's very different than what the theme is around Vermont or around outside of Chittenden County. That, again, we've done diligent work with a demographer, which isn't just us speculating growth. And so we've done that work. Our cost per pupil, when we look at it in comparison to others in Vermont, is certainly very reasonable where we are. And as Bridget said, our tax rate, although we're concerned about the increase this year, the overall, I think as Brian said, the 5-year and the 10-year is in check. Part of the volatility of this is in play. And what you need to know is that when homes sell above their appraised values, right, which is what we have going on, people want to move into South Burlington. I know that not everybody maybe believes that, but currently the realtors are saying we can't find the homes. And when we do find the homes, they're selling at or well above their appraised value.
So I'll stop you there, because when you talk to people about who are home appraisers or realtors, you're saying that this whole thing is going to increase property values. They're saying the opposite, because if you raise these taxes so high, people are not going to want to come here. The school is not going to draw people. If people aren't going to be able to afford the taxes or don't want to pay these taxes, they're not going to buy here.
Well, again, I think
homes will no longer sell for over their appraised value.
I think we have to respectfully, I do disagree, Dan.
What
I'm we do here is that we have people currently calling on a regular basis, wanting to move to South Burlington.
That's
one of the major,
that's today.
Allow me to finish. When they want to move in here, they're looking at the educational component. The realtors that we do talk with, they're asking about opportunities to come into the community. They have a lot of desire from community. We're certainly recognizing that the tax burden on the future, but at the same time, we're seeing the desire to move in. So we're not myopic to the issues. Cost per pupil, the appraised values right now are well above, which is part of the tax rate. 4% of that 11 is related to the common level of appraisal. Homes are selling well above. So again, I hear what you're saying, and I want to be respectful to your questions. But again, I do want you to hear, again, the board has been at it, and we have provided a lot of details, some of which people who are in the room have heard it time and time again. Some are new here to that. But again, it's not an easy decision. I think we're in education because we believe it's a critical, important component for the city, right? Really critical, important. We want to keep that right. And we recognize the challenges in the state funding system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, can I just make some corrections, and I'll wait my turn for the thing? Sure. I've heard a couple of things that need to be corrected. I'm Jerry Silverstein. So first of all...
Hi, Jerry.
Hi, David. So, Bridget, you said taxes are flat. David, you recognize this, I presume?
I think so, Jerry. It looks like our budget information, yeah.
So I'm looking at page 13.
I don't have it in front of me, no.
13. It's South Burlington School District budget and tax rate changes proposed 2021 budget. But at the bottom, it says 5-year averages, 10-year averages. So for the change in tax rate, the 5-year average is 2.05%. It's not, I don't know, to me, that's not flat. Anybody want to argue with that?
It's not flat.
It's not flat. 10-year average is 2.46%, okay? So it's clearly not flat.
That's with this year, though. That's with the budget that we're proposing for this year. If you look at what the tax rate is for 1920.
If you're going to do 5 and 10-year budget, you don't get to pick and choose which years you're going to include. So let's get rid of the CLA. You're still between 7 and 8%, correct? Even if the CLA was 100%. You're still at between a 7 and 8%.
Without the 4.
Okay, so
for the factors
you're saying discount the 11.22%, but you can't do that.
I'm not saying discount it.
Okay.
I'm just saying that this is not a pattern over the last several years of 11.2% increases. That's fear-mongering.
Let me make sure the listening audience knows the impact here, because you're looking at the tax impact of the bond. I look at two things. There's the tax impact of the bond, and there's the regular yearly base increase in the education tax. Because when I get my tax bill, if this bond is approved, it's not going to be two components. It's going to be one component. Why? Because the cost of renovations and the cost of construction is no different than teacher salaries. It's part of public school education. Anybody disagree with that? You're going to get one number on your tax bill. It's going to say this is your education tax. This is how much the state of Vermont is going to give you to help you out with your education tax. So I have to consider two things are going to determine my education tax: the bond tax and the regular yearly education tax. Okay, so this year the tax rate is up 11.2%. I understand that's an outlier. I understand what the average is. I ran a serial progression, David. I increased the base tax 5% per year. It's way above average. I only did it because I wanted to look at a worst case scenario, something that nobody expects, something that is not part of the historical average. But what if? And then I added it to the cost of the bond from your tables. And I'll get to the table in a minute, but I don't want to lose track of what I'm talking about. If I then combine those numbers, David, 19 years into the bond, my education tax bill is $15,000. Now, my house has a current tax bill of $5,200. It's a little bit below the average single-family home in South Burlington. That's with a 5% yearly increase in the base budget, serially progressed for 19 years, added to the tax impact of the bond. Now, the state currently maximally provides me $5,600 of support, which means if the worst case scenario comes about, 19 years into the bond, I'm faced with a $10,000 tax bill. Now, David, I've saved up money. I could survive. There are a lot of people in South Burlington who could not survive with that type of hit. Now, I want everybody who's watching this to understand that. There are people who would not survive a $10,000 bill that they had to pay. That's a big issue, David. There is a big amount of uncertainty in this issue here, which I can't project and you can't project, but we both have to accept that uncertainty is there. That scares the pants off of people. This is a 32-year bond. That's a long time to keep people in a dark room without knowing what the future holds. Okay. Now, I'm going to let Christy go, but just to answer your question with the tax table. You can take this to the bank, Alex. Okay? I've spoken to the tax department till I'm blue in the face. I've asked them 5 times because I didn't want to misspeak. I hate to be accused of misinformation. The tax table based upon income, is it correct as an approximation
for some residents in the community. Exact number, I don't know. Is it correct? Yes. For some residents in the community, as an approximation, it is correct. For other residents in the community, categorically, the numbers are false because of Vermont education tax law. If you look at the fine aspects of Vermont education tax law, you can call the tax department. You ask them this. If a house is appraised at more than $400,000, Alex, and your income is $70,000, how much of your tax bill is going to be income sensitized? Just ask them, once you go above $400,000 of assessed value, will your full tax bill be income sensitized? You understand what I'm talking about. This is the bottom line. There are restrictions in the income sensitivity benefit. So in that table, the numbers are correct for some people. What number? I don't know what number it is. I don't have the state does, but I don't have it. But for other individuals, those numbers are meaningless because they have exceeded the parameters of Vermont education tax law, and that table simply doesn't apply. Now, it would have been impossible to do all the permutations. I understand that. But if you had said, these are the parameters of Vermont education tax law at the top of the chart, people could have said, well, these numbers don't apply to me then. But that's not what happened, David. And so full disclosure is full disclosure. You can't say, well, it's not my problem. Vermont tax law is complicated. That really doesn't help a lot of people in the community. And I've spent 6 months on this. I'm probably about the 85% level about being comfortable. When I went to a seminar given by the Vermont Tax Department in December, a CPA who has an MBA from one of the Ivy League schools, at the end of the presentation, spoke to the tax department person giving it and said, in all of my life, I have never met a program more complicated and more convoluted than Vermont education tax law. So it is a bear to understand, but once you dig down, the conclusion you realize is it's very hard to accurately communicate to people exactly what the consequences are. But because of that, you have to convey that message to the public. You have to say we can't do it. Okay?
Well, I think we have. And we remember the board, on behalf of the board said from the very get-go that we want to be careful about giving out numbers. Right? But one of the things that we heard loud and clear is we need to know the implication. So we did the very best we could with the information that we had to provide a table, again, based on property, and we were careful. We probably should have been even more careful, but we were really, really careful around the complexity of coming up with what that would mean to me, because we did not want to be misleading. Okay. And we've had some iterations on the chart on income sensitivity, because we are really worried about being as transparent as we can. Now, one of the things I want to say to you, Jerry, is that one of the things around assumptions that you make is that it doesn't have any factors, and nor did we when we did the cost analysis. We never increased the common level of appraisal. We never changed the number of equalized students. In any of those assumptions, that being said, we felt that that was the right way to approach it so that you would get more of the full exposure. What we know is, based on enrollment, based on projections from our demographer, we know that that's not likely going to be the case. We know that currently we're already exceeding enrollment expectations now, right? We know that the CLA is likely not going to change, not going to stay where it is. Yes, it's going to move back over to the reappraised value of the home, and so we recognize those. And in calculations, again, I don't know, I didn't see your calculations, but I don't believe it factored in all of those changes that might happen in a 10, 15, or 20-year period on the financial conditions of the city. We currently know, again, just a bit of example, most of you travel around South Burlington, you know Market Street is currently now open, right? If you haven't driven there, you should. What we know is there's some development that has happened there. That single development has brought a large number of students into our school. So those are some variables we did not necessarily calculate and bake into our assumptions. Again, those would have to be done. We were careful. The board was careful not to go out and overinflate those numbers and make it look better. Again,
for every reasonable point you make, I could easily come back with another one. For instance, with the reappraisal going on now, I expect that the average single-family home in South Burlington will have an assessed value of $400,000. Why is that important? Because the cutoff on the income sensitivity is $400,000. So if you earn $90,000 or less, Alex, the state will income sensitize your income if your house is assessed at less than $400,000. If your house is assessed at $500,000, then your education tax assessment will only be income sensitized to the tune of 80% because you're 20% over the limit. If you're at between $90,000 and $136,500, the state will only income sensitize the first $225,000 of your house. So as the appraised value of your house increases, the amount of income sensitivity benefit you get is going to decrease. Now, I'll say one more thing. You have an 11.3% increase in the draw from the education fund this year. If that was applied statewide, David, that would equal $190 million of additional money the education fund would have to generate. And for those of you who don't know, all public school education in the state of Vermont the money for it comes from the education state fund.
Could you please address the board?
Fine. All the money to pay for public school education in the state of Vermont comes from the education state fund. It has multiple revenue streams. Property taxes, which are what we're talking about, constitute only 26% of the education fund. The biggest revenue stream are non-homestead, such as businesses and second homes. Then there's the state sales tax. There's a whole source of revenues. If every community in Vermont did what you're doing this year, just on the budget, the education fund, which is constituted with about $1.7 billion of assets, would have to generate another $190 million. David, there were only 4 states which lost population over the last decades. Vermont was one. The lowest.
South Burlington is not, though.
No, I understand. But the money is coming from the state education fund. If we stress the fund, then that's going to be a stressor for the entire state of Vermont, okay? You can't look, South Burlington is not an island unto itself.
Oh, I know.
The way education funding in the state of Vermont works. If this was another state, you could make that argument, but it doesn't apply to the state of Vermont. In the state of Vermont, there is a single legal entity which is responsible for public education in the state of Vermont. That entity is the state of Vermont. When I pay my tax bill, when the city deposits that check, that money instantly becomes part of the state of Vermont. If the city spent that money, they would be guilty of a crime. The money does not belong to the city of South Burlington. It belongs to the state of education, the education fund. So what we do here does impact the rest of the state of Vermont in terms of education. So it's important, you talk about your global citizenship. Well, we have to be concerned about the rest of the state. This is not a single issue. It is a very complicated jigsaw puzzle in which there are many moving pieces. We only found out in January what the projected impact was going to be, and we only found out in February the revised impact of the income-based table. This is no way, in my opinion, to run a program whose estimated cost is $345 million. It is a rush to judgment. Even if you have good reasons for that rush to judgment, it is still a terrifying rush to judgment with a very large sum of money. I haven't even covered the reason I wanted to come here, but I'll let Christy go.
Hi, Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Stern. First of all, thank you guys so much. You do not have an easy job. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort. I've been here 6 years, and we love South Burlington. I have a small business in South Burlington, and hands down, I think I live on the best street in South Burlington. Wonderful neighbors. But I'm just trying to understand, and we've talked a lot about transparency this evening. And just in that transparency, my husband and I are floored at what our taxes are going to do because of this. Just from the bond alone, with our house has not been reappraised yet. This is not including the 3% tax the city wants to charge us. It's not including what Champlain Water District is asking. It's not including the 11% for the budget raise. But our taxes alone will go up $400 a month. A month. And granted, we are very blessed, but we work very hard, and we have worked very hard to get where we are. So in transparency, I am just curious, Bridget, I noticed that your home address is the registered address for the PAC for the yes vote. And I'm just wondering in transparency how you being on the board and pushing an opinion, like, could you speak to that?
Well, I think, I mean,
I would be happy to address it, and then David has some other things. Do you want to go first?
I think, you know, a political action committee can be formed by anybody, including our board members. There's no violation for if our board members wanted to establish that. The law allows that. It allows, you know, my spouse to be able to do it. In this case, it allows Bridget's spouse to be able to do it. It's an avenue that's available through our free speech. So it's allowed to do that. I think that's an important piece. There's no violation at all. And in some cases, we have had folks in the past that have done similarly.
Did you want to add anything?
I would just say there is precedent for it. This is not my PAC. My husband is set up as treasurer of the PAC because there were people asking where they could donate to the yes cause because they wanted to see the bond passed. Frankly, other people who are working on that side of the issue feel intimidated. They feel intimidated by the online rhetoric. They feel bullied. And they were nervous about going to the Secretary of State and setting up a PAC and putting themselves out there as treasurer. So my husband has been my campaign treasurer the last time I ran. He felt comfortable with the state regulations. He felt comfortable reaching out to the state. And he said, if no one else is going to do it, I will go and do it. And he's been very active. And that's his choice. He wants to do that, and he believes in the project, and he and a group of other people, yes, they are working because they believe that this is the right thing for South Burlington schools. There's also precedent in the city beyond the school board for city leaders, as David said, as private individuals to put their own money into something that they believe. And so, for example, when the TIF was passed, city councilors pooled their own money, their own individual money, to buy signs to encourage a yes vote on the TIF. And so, again, I don't feel like I'm not being transparent about that. So I'm happy to answer those questions, but the board obviously, because we voted unanimously, believes in this project. We believe it's the right way forward for South Burlington, and we know that some people disagree with that, and that's totally fair. But yes, I absolutely believe that we should move forward this project. I wouldn't have voted for it otherwise. And yeah, I mean, that's where we are.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry
Christy?
People felt bullied. I followed that social media, and I haven't seen any of that. So
there's been, you know,
really sorry that's happened.
Mostly really successful time in South Burlington with a lot of issues. We've had some issues that have been very contentious, and the social media avenues have been very hurtful to some of our students, some of our staff. And so, again, it's part of what we need to evolve with as a community and a society on how we manage and how we support each other. Sometimes people will say things that are not nice and not okay in social media, or act in a way that's just not okay. And so we've certainly experienced that as a school district for some of our students and staff.
I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, no problem.
So I wanted to ask about the demographer that you guys hired. I was just looking through some of the reports, and it seemed like in 2018, the report came back that the South Burlington student population was declining. So I
don't think it was ever in there. Again, Christy, be happy to go through it with you. Again, a level of transparency is really important, and I have board members, both in the past and present, that are very diligent about numbers and wanting to see those numbers. So the demographer, we actually did an additional amount of scrutiny. When we looked at developments, we asked the city about what developments were either online or approved. The demographer, if they weren't yet approved or even in the queue, we did not include them in that calculation.
Yeah, his standard was things that were permitted. So if anything, I'm concerned about the demographer maybe not having captured some of the development that's now on the books. So for example, a lot of the Snyder-Braverman work that is about to start in City Center was not permitted at the time that latest demographic report was done. And you know, I've heard concerns about that from staff at high school and middle school level that maybe we're under sizing what we're proposing. Particularly at the middle school level, there was a real strong sense when we had the staff meeting with them. They were concerned that we weren't building enough capacity at the middle school level because they're feeling pretty pressured in the building. Even though we are not at theoretical capacity in this building, they're feeling very pressured to have enough space. So if anything, on the demographer, I'm wondering how long we wait before we redo that report. We had to pick a baseline number to design around. And what the architects did was really focus on core spaces and making sure that core spaces were big enough that if we did undersize what we were proposing, that those core spaces would be big enough to handle a little bit more student population. And if we needed to add classrooms, the buildings would be flexible enough to do that. But as I said, or as David started to say, and I interrupted him so rudely, we did have our demographer sit down with one of the city staff, and we literally went neighborhood by neighborhood. This is how many units are planned in each of these developments. And it did not include things like the Snyder-Braverman work that's about to happen. It did not include some of the controversial ones that are still in the early stages that are being discussed. And so if those things come online, those could bring even additional students beyond the 125 we're expecting at the high school and the 70 that we're expecting at the middle school level.
So I don't know specifically if you saw a dip somewhere. Again, we do have our cohort body of students that do move through. For instance, we have one of the largest 8th grade classes ever moving over to the high school. Obviously, they'll take on the tuition students, but just the resident student population is significant. And so when that happens, you'll see a large class leave and maybe an average class coming in 6th grade. So you may see a little bit of a change number at the middle level, but then you'd see an increase at the high school. Similarly, we have cohorts that are traveling through the elementary school, and certain when we look at those over, a period, we may see a little bit of a change. But right now, the net overall, and actually at pretty much all the schools, with the exception of the middle school next year, has increasing enrollment. And as Bridget said, with a lot of the developments that have happened, like with Rick Marcotte on Market Street, those 20 additional students, and forecasted now more, it's likely it's putting those enrollment numbers more increased than what we previously reported. Yeah, and again, we're sensitive. Currently, Gary and I we're looking at that, and part of with the new developments coming on, and looking at maybe where we need to maybe have the developments repointed. Because when we have an Act 250 permit for like the Snyder-Braverman property, we do get questionnaires and information about the numbers of students we expect, et cetera, and what school they would go to. That doesn't mean it's a hard, fast rule. But part of that is looking at before they come online, can we repoint them to a school that has a capacity, right, before they actually get in. Right.
So I'm just wondering if, no offense, I'm sorry, I know you're not from
No,
South
Delaney actually is from Georgia.
Sorry,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if we did drop those tuition students, that would buy us some time that we could possibly save money to build a new school?
Well, if enrollment only was the issue, but remember what I said and what you've heard from the board, enrollment and the tuition student isn't the overarching objective.
Right, but if we fixed the mechanical issues and the electrical issues, dropped the tuition students, and then started building a little slush fund for the next 10 years, would that be?
The challenge, there are a couple of challenges with that. One, fixing electrical, fixing HVAC, fixing some of these infrastructure systems is really big work. It's not sort of 8-week over the summer kind of work. And so it would disrupt education in the buildings now to do that. It's more expensive than you think to do that level of work. So we'd be asking for an investment from the community now, and then to come back 10 years later, even if we've been safe. But where that money comes from to save, that has to come from the community too. We would be having to add that to budgets all along the way. Plus, we'd be having to fix any stewardship items that come up. Bless you, Alex. So, for example, roofs or other things that weren't on that schedule of, just, for example, pick a couple of things and do them. We would have to continue to invest money in those. And then we get to the end of that 10 years and we'd be in the same situation of having invested that stewardship money and not getting the full life out of it. The other thing is that the rate that construction costs are increasing at 5% a year, a $209 million project. If we were to do a similar scope of project 10 years from now, we're talking over $300 million. So the rate of increase is so fast that you're basically adding, 10, and it goes up from there, $10 million to a project each year. And so trying to save the rate of saving to try to keep up with that, even to get a smaller project at the end, is just, it's hard to believe that that's going to be something that the community will support without knowing what that project is and what the scope of that will be. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
You may be surprised at what construction costs are in 10 years. They're not slated always to go up. I mean, if you look at construction costs in 08, 09, that was 10 years ago. The only reason I say that, I mean, the economists are predicting a dip in 2021, 2022. It won't be 08, 09 recession, but a little bit of a dip. Construction has been on the up curve for about 5 years now. We're probably on the generous upside of the curve, but eventually we'll dip.
Could be. Again, again, we're not the experts in that field, and we've solicited that feedback. And I think we've kind of safely said, 5%. I think others would say higher, and the average over that. So we just know that it's increasing. I do want to go back just briefly to the tuition situation.
Yeah.
Because if we say no to our tuition students, and we push 170 students, other places may not have room for them. Let's just play that out for a second.
Okay.
And so, based on Jerry's example, what happens in the system currently under Act 68 would be that the community that we would say no to would have to find a home for 100 students. They'd have to go out and build a school for 100 students. And that money would come out of the Ed Fund, putting upward pressure and probably an inefficient or less efficient system than what we have today.
But aren't there
and
other
part of
high
collaboration is an important component when we look at how we can transport, how we can, serve the student body of Vermont in the most efficient way. So again, it's not a net neutral. That then the yield rate, which is currently set, we'd have to drop the yield rate, which means local communities would have to raise additional money, increasing taxes. So that's in play on the, as Jerry was highlighting, the Vermont funding system would have then pressures that would be applied to South Burlington. And so those things they're not zero, right? If you said no, we would lose about $2.8 million as of today. We would lose the opportunities that we provide currently to our resident population. That would have to be reduced. The reductions would not happen just at the high school because the money that comes in supports the entire K through 12 program, including our elementary programming, right? So we would have to see some pretty significant changes, and likely we would see increasing taxes as a result of some of those decisions. Now, again, I don't want to mislead people that currently Essex does receive students, and so does Colchester and some of Burlington. So maybe there would be space, but if that starts to become a trend, then they likely will need additional space, which will put an upward pressure again on their system and have to do some of the work as well. So anyway, I'm not trying to be, that's again
Sure.
a little bit on the tuition and demographer
What
work.
I hear you saying, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, we get $2.1 million from 2.8 million from the tuition students. What is our return on investment? Once we consider buses, the person that we pay in Georgia to recruit students, the extra teachers that we need, what's our return on investment on those students?
High. Yeah.
Do you have a number?
We've done the math. When we first started transportation, when we looked at the cost of the bus, the benefits and the salary, we needed about 5 students to ride the bus based on the tuition cost. Everything after that was a benefit, again, into the system. That was just in the transportation. Then all of that, again, played into the system. So again, I don't have time to go into all of the analytics. Most importantly, students that come to us from the islands in Georgia have been an important part of our history in South Burlington and adding to the rich opportunities that we currently provide, both in their exchange and the program.
If you happen to come across a number,
for
an ROI number
for
tuition students.
Yeah, again, I gave you an example of
an example, but overall, I mean, you can't just look at one example to calculate ROI, right? You have
just
to look
saying
at
it's
all
in the
of it.
positive.
Yeah, the challenge is that they're not, tuition students aren't looked at as a profit center. So in order to do something like that, you would need to allocate to the tuition students a certain percentage of every single thing in the building, and they're not looked at that way. Basically, our tuition is set by a state formula that sort of says, here are your overall expenses. Take out things that are not funded directly from property tax. So take out, special education reimbursements from the state and from the federal level, some other things to get down to a number of that's sort of an allowable budget, and you divide that by the seated students in South Burlington. So the tricky thing is there isn't sort of an analysis in the business office that says this is the return on investment in tuition students. It's much more the fact that having tuition students, there's been no decision at any board meeting or any board level to not have tuition students. So for right now, they are a part of our system. And they allow us some of the breadth of our programming. The scale that they bring allows more opportunities for South Burlington students to have a greater variety of classes than they otherwise would. And so to take those out for 10 years, until our resident population is back up to that level, seems like we're really shortchanging the students in our system.
Which I don't want to do. I'm all for education, but I'm just, when I look at a $345 million bond and my taxes going up $400 a month, it's...
Well, it's a $209 million bond. Don't confuse what people will vote on.
Won't confuse it, but you and I both know bonds have interest.
Right. When we buy a house, we know that we're going to bond for it, and we're going to have the end result of what I bought is going to be more.
Right. But when I sign the paper, I know what my interest rate is.
Well, but again, I mean, when you finish paying, you'll know what the cost is. And right now, we know that we got to go out and borrow money. We're going to pay interest.
Yeah.
We know that it's more than the 209, but to give you an exact figure of what that is would be wrong on behalf of the board or our financial folks.
No, but I think a good estimate is probably
we know it's more than the 209, and
million.
You're going to borrow. That's a big amount of money. We know that.
It's a lot of money.
But it is confusing for people when you call it a $345 million bond, because then people are wondering, wait, I thought it was a $209 million bond. Right. Did the principal go up to 345? So it's just good to be really clear about 209.6 plus interest is 345.
That's right.
It's more words. I totally get it, but it's just confusing for folks who are coming to this new, who haven't been paying attention. It gets confusing. We've had some questions about that. How did it jump from $209 million project to a $345 million project?
Yeah, I understand. I think maybe if people understood,
well, we're trying again,
you take it back to how
their
homes are purchased. When you purchase a $300,000 home, you don't pay $300,000 for it. If you take out a mortgage, you pay interest.
Again, we're just trying to be transparent, as Bridget
Sure.
said. You don't put then 346 on it, because then people, again, we've had some confusion, like, okay, I get it. So 346 is what's going to be the bond, so now I got to add interest? No. It's 209. We have to go out and bond for that. We do not have that amount of money, so you got to go out and bond for it. So
Right.
we're just trying to, again, be consistent, and it's not trying to be deceptive
Sure.
at all. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fair enough. I know a lot of the material that I've seen, the marketing material, has said that this new building would offer better education for the students. And I'm not an educator. My sister's an educator. I am not an educator. I have never taught class, so I can't speak from that. But never in my life have I heard of a new building offering a better education. I've heard of better curriculums or, collaborative work environments, which you can pull tables together and desks together. So I'm just wondering why that's included in the marketing literature.
Well, again, I think when you look at the decision and the diligence by the board, as you go down the avenue of looking at doing the upgrades to the major systems, when you go down that road, you also need to look at what are the expected outcomes on the basis of what we teach our children. Again, if we go back to 1960, if we make an analogy to our school, if this is our school room, right, or where we learn, and it never made a change in anything, similar to what you might see in an operating room in 1960. One would say, no, the operating room looks a lot different now than it did in 1960. Now, I don't want to make that direct comparison because we're talking about, the human body. But here we're talking about the human body and how we educate. And we're trying to, again, hypothetically, educate our students to be able to walk into that environment and not the too far distant future. So having the opportunity to collaborate, which we know is so important, having the opportunity to develop personally and have those dispositions as problem solvers are critical to the future. And so people may want to say that it's the Taj Mahal of a building, and I think it's ingenious by the architects to open up our hallways. Our current hallways are long and narrow, 15 feet or more wide, but the idea of opening them up to create extended learning spaces and putting some opportunity for passive supervision so students can collaborate far more than we have today. We don't have those. And again, as Bridget has provided in numerous examples when she's done the presentation, our high school is block-walled. So to open those up would require significant, engineering and beam restructuring. And it's, again, that's what it would take to change some of those things. Again, due diligence, when you do that cost factor, gets right back to why would we do that, right? Why would we be doing that when we know that's not going to get us where we need to be in the long term? We're going to do a series of things over a 5-year, 6-year, 10-year period. With escalation, you're going to be probably well over the cost in which we are at today. And we recognize that it's a lot. So anyway, when you talk about the delivery of education, primarily we've got system-related issues, and if you're going to go that far, you better make sure for the long term, the 60 to 100 years, you're in a better place than you are today. You don't want to keep coming back to your community. I'm a community member. I don't want to have this board or any board that will follow and come back and say, we should have thought about this 15, 20 years ago. I will be one community member say, you should have thought long and hard, because I do want South Burlington to be prosperous well into the future.
But I think we can move tables together to have.
I would encourage you that the presentations from our community information nights are up online, and there is a big section in there that talks about the educational model of today. And it's not just focused on today's educational model. One of the challenges that we really have at the high school especially, but at both schools, is the lack of flexibility to change in the future too, because we know that things will continue to evolve. But it was really interesting. David and I were just in Montpelier yesterday testifying before some committees of the House to talk about school construction aid and the potential restarting of that in Vermont. And it was really interesting for me to hear smaller school districts, particularly those who are sort of coming together under Act 46 and have buildings that are in real need, even folks who are dealing with, mold climbing up the walls, they're saying, we don't just want emergency money to renovate these schools. The educational system is so different. The student population that we're serving looks very different than the one that this building was designed for. And the needs of our students are different. The way we teach them is different as a result. The expectations of them when they get out of high school are very different, and they need a different way of being educated. We've already gone pretty far down that path, but we are bumping up against the building in terms of things that we can do, and that's been noted for quite some time. And so, as David said, to do a deep level of work on an infrastructure basis and not think about how we're providing education just seems irresponsible, frankly, because we know that even if it is just renovations, that's still a very expensive process. We're not going to be able to come back to the community, in 10 or 20 years and say, as David said, oops, we really should have thought about how, the needs of our students and the needs of how we're teaching them today. So I would encourage you to go look at those presentations. It's hard for me to keep it short, I've been told. And so there is a big section in those presentations about the educational model that we're trying to implement and that we have been working on implementing, and how these buildings really would support that.
Thank you,
I would
Christy.
just say, as a recruiter, someone that places people in jobs on a daily basis. Yes, companies want kids that are collaborative, but they want kids that can think, kids that can adapt to whatever their environment might be. They don't always have new buildings for kids to come in and work. There's a lot of complaints that with millennials, there's an entitlement issue, that they think they should have the $50,000 job coming out of school and the shiny new desk and the shiny new car. And that's just not realistic. So I worry about what we're teaching our kids, that for them to be totally, fully better educated, they need a new building. But I guess my bottom line is I can't afford this. I have a small business here, I worked with Betsy Bishop to, let's bring jobs to Vermont, let's bring business to Vermont because we want Vermont to grow because it is a declining state. It is the second most or least populous state in the U.S. Fox News just came out with that report. So you don't have the population to support the money that you're asking for, bottom line. I am happy to take my time and work with any of you to put my head together or put our heads together to find new ways, but to ask people to spend this much money, it's not feasible for us. And I've talked to 3 realtors because I did my homework. I didn't just want to come and say, oh, this is, what I heard. I actually did my research. The realtor said if anything were going to hurt the sale price of my house, it would be this tax hike. She's like, 2 of them said, I don't know if we could turn your house. So I'm stuck. I would be happy to move out and let somebody else move in, but I'm stuck. So,
Christy, for your comments. We appreciate you coming and sharing.
Thank you for your time.
Same. I think we're good. We do need to move on. Madam Chair.
I didn't get to talk about what I really wanted to. I think it's important.
Jerry, yes.
It's a health issue.
Can you do it in 15?
Yes.
15 seconds.
And we've been talking about education. I thought we might
10 minutes, quarter after?
For a change. Let's do education. So let me ask you.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm going to give you a paper. It's called The Effect of Daylighting on Student Health and Performance. Has anybody read this paper?
Yes.
I have not. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
Like to tell me some of the highlights of this paper.
I've read the article in the other paper by the lady who's an architect who specializes in the whole Northeast with lighting, and she's contradicted everything.
Okay. But for this paper, do you remember any highlights that you'd like to share? This is the way I teach, by the way. I ask questions.
Yeah, and that's not what the board meeting is for. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your questions.
Okay, so I'll go right to the paper.
And then we need to move on.
Okay. I don't have a budget, so I only made 7 copies. You'll have to give.
We'll share it, Jerry. No problem.
Share. And I'm going to give 1 to the camera. I don't know if you can focus on the table.
Jerry,
we're talking
can you please address the board?
You have the opportunity to reach out to the community with tens of thousands of dollars. I have nothing. You can tell whatever you want to the community. I have no opportunity other than a Facebook group. So don't deny me a little bit of an opportunity to tell the community a little bit about information that I think is important.
The board's wanting to give you time, Jerry, and I think they've demonstrated that time and time again. So
And all I was doing was I was giving the camera, because I'm going to talk to you about a paper, and I was going to
RETN really doesn't, again, we like Richard, but Richard's not in the place to try to get that into a scanned opportunity for you. So
okay,
again.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So if you could turn to page, it's page 130. It's the next to last page. Actually, I have one more copy if the audience wants to look. Now, the point of this paper, and I should mention, this is posted to your website. This was not a paper I found. This is on your website, southburlingtonvermontschools.com/updates. This paper suggests in the table that increased daylighting in schools will have tremendous benefits. And those benefits include the daylighting will reduce cancer, reduce ulcers, reduce high blood pressure in young children, reduce stress, I could believe that, But my favorite one is reduce microbes. Please raise your hand. How many people have a degree in microbiology? I have 3. I have no idea what the hell this means. What does reduced microbes mean? Your body has 1,000 times as many bacteria as it has cells in your body, and your body has between 30 and 40 trillion cells. There are lots of good bacteria in your body. What does it mean, reduced bacteria? I have no idea. Where does the paper come from? This was part of a conference. It wasn't a peer-reviewed journal. It was a conference. It was the proceedings of a conference. And it was produced by the Department of Architecture, the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment at the National University of Malaysia. Okay? Now, David, if you presented this paper to your English department, they would have a problem with it. Now, you could say I'm being a bit of a racist, saying bad things about Malaysia, but I will tell you, when people in a country where English is not the first language submit a paper for publication to an English journal, they will generally share the paper with somebody who's mastered the English language so that the paper is grammatically correct, so when it's published, people accept the paper for a high-quality publication. The sentence structure, the grammar in this paper is really poor. And I'm not trying to get down on Malaysia. I'm just trying to say this was not a peer-reviewed paper. It was a conference. It was a presentation. The presentations were simply collated together, and whatever people said was published in the conference proceedings. Now, if you realistically look at this, you're trying to convince the community of South Burlington that if you increase daylighting in this $345 million building, you're going to reduce cancer, reduce ulcers, reduce microbes, reduce blood pressure. Sorry, I have a hard time believing that. And I've been in the field of human health and disease for most of my life. Everything I learned about study design to prove these things, I learned as a small group instructor in a course at the medical school called Genetics, Ethics, and Epidemiology. The epidemiology section involves study design. How do you prove these things? It was taught by a man you may know. His name is Mark Levine. Does anybody recognize that name? Yep. He is the current Commissioner of Health. I know study design. It would take you decades and hundreds of millions of dollars to prove any of these things. Why am I saying this to you? You have this paper on your website. People who don't have the background that I do will look at this and draw conclusions which are not justified. I'm sorry.
Did you look at any of these footnotes? There's 41 of them. Did you look at any of the
footnotes? I looked at every one of them, Alex. Some of them don't have all the information you need to actually look them up. Some of them have dates, some of them don't have dates, some of them have names and journals, some of them don't have journals. So I've looked at every one of them. Many of them go back 20 years, okay? So the question of how relevant a 20-year-old paper is legitimate. I've looked at the references. Trust me, I understand the importance of references. But to make these statements, Alex, in a student building is an incredible stretch because I know the cost of proving cause and effect. In science, correlation does not equal causation. Proving something causes cancer is incredibly difficult. It costs tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and it takes years, if not decades. You cannot legitimately say these things are going to be reduced without any authority whatsoever. This is not full transparency. This is sensationalism. This is propaganda. I am sorry. I don't buy this. Don't take my word. Submit this paper to Mark Levine. Get his opinion on it. Say, is it justified in this paper to make these statements? I would be shocked if he said it is. So what I'm trying to say to you, I don't think you've been as transparent as you say you have. This is on your website. People who don't have my background are going to read it, and they will draw conclusions which they're not justified in drawing. And that, I think, is a serious mistake.
Thank you for your feedback, Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, only thing I would say is that we do know that having the availability to have sunlight plays a role in people feeling better, okay?
I agree with that.
And so I don't know that we would want to construct CMU block wall and no windows, okay?
I would
That's
not
all I'm
disagree
saying.
with that.
And I think
there's a long distance between that statement.
Understand. We understand that you're questioning the paper and the efficacy of the paper. So duly noted. I'm simply wanting to say to you around the design of our current facilities, this one particularly, where we have students and staff that don't see the light of day hardly at all, okay? And again, the design was a design flaw, and will understand that you think it's a real stretch around the documentation, so noted. Thank you.
Rob, did you want to add something? I'd like to introduce Rob Fitzgerald from Dore and Whittier.
Thanks. So I'll just respond to that. I'll take the heat for providing that document. That was one of about 10 different research papers that are found online and available online to anyone. And the point of it, as David had mentioned, is that, you know, highlighting the importance of natural daylight in schools. And it is something that our firm tries to incorporate as much as we can, because we do know that natural daylight does help students. And you know, you can just not only look at studies, as there are many of them, but we also know from hospitals that have changed the way that they have designed their spaces to incorporate more natural daylight, and studies have shown that people do get better faster from hospital rooms that have more daylight. That's just one example. But the point is that we have incorporated as much daylight into this project as we can, as opposed to, as you said, having a school with very little daylight. And as anyone can experience, as everyone has a home, they all have windows in their home, and if they can imagine buying a home without any windows, you know, the point is that daylight is important, and we try to highlight that as a integral part of our design.
And I also just wanted to point out that the daylight is important, and it is something that we considered as one of a number of factors when we were deciding which direction we should go. Should we go the renovation route, which really wouldn't allow us, given what we know about the middle school? It's very hard to incorporate natural light through renovations in the middle school, given what we know about how the building is constructed, and what we know about hazardous materials that would be disturbed if we tried to do that in the middle school being the school that has the biggest percentage of its floor space without any natural light. So it's about 50% of the middle school that has no access to daylight. But it's one of a large number of things that we considered. It wasn't the thing that drove us to decide that we should rebuild the middle school instead of renovating it. But it was one of a number of things. So I just don't want to overemphasize that one specific issue as we made our decision. So.
Ready to move on?
I believe we're ready to move on. So we'll move on to item number 9, budget communication plan.
So I don't have a lot here. Just the fact that, as we highlighted with master planning and visioning, we also have March 2nd, and we'll be going over the budget and are certainly available to answer questions. So, as far as budget, I don't know if, unless the board has any.
My only question for you was, do you have anything set up that you need support for? Like, are there any meetings set up with any, like, senior centers or the Young at Heart lunch or any of those things? I feel like we're a little closer to budget than when we normally talk about those things, so I don't know if you need any support from any of us on that.
Trying to get into, again, we've been a little bit backlogged, and I think to Cole's point, we didn't get in even some of our student connections that we have in the past, but we're trying to put that together. We know that through the vacation week, there's a lot of us that are working and trying to get out as much as we can.
Yeah, and so, I will be here if you need help during vacation weeks.
Yeah, so I haven't had any plans right now to get out there, but you know, certainly we want to be able to be diligent in response, which we have, and I want to again thank Gary and Amity and board members for helping to get questions answered that have come up either budget-wise, although most of them in master planning or the bond particular piece. So that's all I have. Again, highlighting March 2nd for folks, and send us their questions if they have them.
Great, thank you. Item number 10 on the agenda, negotiations update. So I'll just provide a very brief update, which is that we did meet again with the SBEA. It was our third meeting, so wait, our second meeting. Second meeting with the SBEA on Monday night. And so we are just continuing to have talks with the SBEA. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 16th. And then we have another one scheduled for the 30th and another one scheduled for April 16th. Mm-hmm. So we have a sort of calendar going out, and we are just continuing to work through the issues on both sides' proposals. Have discussions.
I think it was your third meeting if you count the...
That's where I got confused, because there was a ground rules meeting. There was a ground rules meeting, and then we had our exchange of proposals.
You,
and
Martin.
then this meeting, we dug a little bit further into each other's proposals and asked a lot of questions and things.
So and we've had the first meeting, the ground rules meeting for the staff negotiations, and have another 2 meetings scheduled in March.
And like you, our next one's on the 16th. So
yes, concurrent negotiations with a lot of our folks. Great. Item number 11, other paper articles. I believe at our place there was a list of other paper articles that we had scheduled out. So the next one would be, it would be due on February 27th. And it was meant to be, it was meant to discuss SBAC results.
Yeah, and we're on par for doing that. I think I'm just going to say to Meg, yes, okay, yeah, we're on par. I know Mike Martin has talked with me about it, and we're on schedule for that. And we'll work to get something to the board prior to that, obviously going out so you get a chance to see it, ask some questions.
Great. And then the next one was Alex on voting outcomes. So there'll be a lot to talk about, I'm sure, voting outcomes and participation. And then we had said, Delaney, you would be on tap next for mental health as a topic. And then Martin, we had you as a legislative update with the hope that you guys will be out of, you'll be out of the legislature by May 28th, and you'll be able to give us a little wrap up, especially on some of these education discussions, but some of the other things would be great as well.
Having solved them all, yep.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other ideas? I think we've got a pretty good calendar for now, unless anyone has any burning topics we'd like to put on for the issue that would run in July. Seeing none, we'll kick it to the next meeting. We'll talk about it again, and we will move on from there. So item number 12 on the agenda is set the agenda for the March 4th, 2020 meeting. So that will be the day after town meeting day. I understand that Donna Kinville is going to come at 5:50, so just before our executive session starts, to swear in the presumptive new board members, Alex and myself, seeing as we're running unopposed. And then, yeah, I don't know if there are other things, if we want to just look through this and add other things that might go on the agenda. Not that Donna will be on the agenda, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yep. So the only thing, I have a couple things I think we need to, so I think we probably should put something on here like a post-vote outcome or something, you know, just, I don't know, Elizabeth usually calls it a kind of a, you know, whatever, a follow-up.
Postmortem?
Postmortem, yeah, I don't know, that's the right word. But just an outcome. Yeah, it does. But anyway, I think we should put that on there. And I am not going to be ready, given March 4th, I'm not ready for the calendar. We're close, but I'm not ready.
Yeah, I was about to ask when we can see that calendar if we're going to talk about it on March 4th.
We have approved the Champlain Valley, which is our 175 regional calendar, but we're trying to get, you know, the specifics to our calendar, our added days in there, and I'm just not ready yet because I got a lot more input to get into it first. So we'll move that to the next meeting. Okay, so we'll add a post-vote outcome conversation, and we'll remove item 14. Again, we'll have an ends in action and the ends matrix review that will take some time.
And the ends matrix review, I'm just trying to recall what that usually looks like.
Well, we haven't done this in the past.
Okay.
But our idea is to give you a review of what are the measurements or the indicators that can be included into that. So a lot of assessment results in there. So we'll just share with you what will go into that and allow that to be a discussion with Mike. Mike will be here with me talking specifically about that. So before we get into the full monitoring, part of this was to look at what are some of the components that will go into it, right? So we'll give you a kind of a list and a description of what those are. Okay.
I'm just wondering generally, now that we're out of back and forth and sort of deciding things, should we ask Elizabeth? Because she's not mic'd up right now.
No,
right?
I've been hearing from her a little bit. Yeah, okay. But she can unmic and say hello, I think, if you want, Brian.
No, I'm just curious. I wanted to make sure we weren't leaving her out.
I am on.
See, I told you. Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
No, I didn't want to interrupt the flow of things, but no, I think we're ahead on other paper articles and on the agenda as well.
Cool.
And thanks for adding the post-vote conversation.
Great. Okay. So it looks like we're all set for March 4th. Item number 13 on the agenda, future agenda items.
Trying to get some of those knocked off.
Yeah,
so
trying to schedule some of those.
We'll spend some more time this coming week.
Well, and we're sort of doing the social media policy review on this agenda for the 4th, right?
Correct.
And I was pleased to see that. That's great.
Yeah. And I don't know, obviously March 4th, we won't have enough time to do it, but again, I just wanted to raise again some of the feedback that we're hearing as we talk about master planning. We're getting some feedback, particularly around PBGRs, and people just having lots of questions about them, and I think it would be really good to get that onto the agenda sooner rather than later, definitely before the end of the school year, so that folks aren't away for the summer when we have that conversation. So I'm not sure that March 4th is the right time to have that, but just to kind of keep bringing that up until we manage to do that.
It's already on there for anybody who's looking, so it's on the second page. It's up on the top there, PBGRs. Yeah. Okay.
The other question I had, and this is another one that has come up as we've been talking about master planning and visioning, is I know that in the past we had a survey of parents that had gone out, if not on an annual basis, at least on an every other year basis, to try to, and I was never a huge fan of, the way we were asking questions in that survey. They weren't necessarily the ones I would have focused on, but I have gotten a lot of general feedback that maybe we're not hearing what the actual user experience is, and whether we need to bring up at some point another survey or another way of making sure that we're getting that kind of feedback. Obviously, people can always reach out to the board or to David or to their building administrators by email, those kinds of things. But in terms of, I think there are a lot of folks maybe out there who sort of have things to say, but are, maybe it doesn't rise to the level of, wanting to come to a meeting and raise it. So my question is, it's more of a question of whether we put that on as a future agenda item. I hate to add another future agenda item, or whether we have some kind of discussion about getting some feedback, just because I think as a board sometimes we don't always have the visibility of what's going on a day-to-day basis, and not that we should be in the middle of trying to determine what's going on a day-to-day basis, but just to sort of hear how people, part of ends perhaps, is hearing how people think it's going, parents and students.
I dig that, and I dig what you mean about being tied into PBGRs and to MPV.
Yeah, you've certainly heard that, and I recognize that, and I think Patrick's heard some of that too, and we've heard some things in the passing more of recent around the math curriculum and things of that nature. So I think, there's some things front and center that we definitely know we need to, kind of help inform and let you know where we're at. Meg, do you know, I know that we do a survey, and I know it's approaching, I believe, right? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
There was a spring survey.
Yeah, so.
And I also know that there's a list of surveys that the administrators keep, and is that part of keeping the staff?
Well, the board doesn't necessarily have all of those. I don't want to make that assumption. So I think it would be good, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I'll talk with Mike and we can give you a little bit more deeper dive around the surveys that we currently do and what that gives us and how that informs some of our work, because we do have requirements in our grants there where we're having to collect survey, information from our students. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn. Let's take a look at it, and maybe we need to broaden that and get some ways to get feedback. So thanks.
I don't know if it's something that the board has looked into in the past, but I know that as graduation approaches, seniors take an exit survey, and so I'm not sure if that type of information is anything that you guys would be interested in looking into.
That's right. Thanks, Cole, for mentioning
Absolutely,
that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So, moving on to consider the minutes of the meetings of January 30th, 2 meetings on February 3rd, February 5th, February 10th, and February 12th. So January 30th was our meeting, our special meeting, which was a community information night at the high school. So it's not really a very extensive set of minutes. Did anyone have any comments on those minutes? January 30? None? How about February 3rd, 9 a.m.? This was our negotiations subcommittee that meets most Mondays for negotiations planning purposes. Any comments on those? Yeah, it's executive session. Yeah, okay. So seeing none, we'll move those along. And then Monday, February 3rd at 4 p.m., that was our actual negotiation subcommittee to actually sit down with the teachers union. Again, it was mostly executive session because our negotiations have to be held in executive session, and so there really aren't a lot of minutes. Seeing none, I'll move those along. Wednesday, February 3rd, or February 5th, sorry. Wednesday, February 5th, which was our last regular school board meeting. Did anybody have any thoughts on the minutes of that meeting? Okay, seeing no comments on those. Monday, February 10th, this is another negotiations planning meeting, our negotiations subcommittee. I had no comments. Anyone else who was at that meeting? Nope. Okay. So I don't see minutes from February 12th.
You gotta go back a couple pages.
Yeah.
Okay, it might be out of order in the packet. Okay, got it. Again, February 12th was another
Evening presentation.
another evening presentation. Anybody have any comments? Nope. Okay, so I believe all of those minutes then, by consensus of the board, are approved.
Ooh, so close.
And we will move on to item number 15, the consent agenda. It looks like we have 2 resignations that aren't exactly resignations. I'll let David maybe speak to those for just a minute. And then a new hire.
So both of these individuals are currently employees. They've been full-time. They've been in a job share, actually, so they've asked for a leave. So this actually is part of our job share guidelines. They've requested, they've done a good job on meeting those outcomes. So it's a resignation for both of them from their full-time status to the .5 for both Elizabeth and Kelly. Chris Johnstone is a current employee. This is just having him pick up a little additional time. It's none of these are added FTEs. So again, that's an important component that I know you're probably wondering about. Okay.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay. So those are approved by consent as well. And then item number 16, accounts payable orders number 29 and 30. Did anyone have any questions or comments about those?
I've been through them and had none.
Same here. Anyone else? Okay. No other questions or comments. We'll move on to item 17, accounts payable order checks to Howard Center for Human Services in the amount of $67,560.35. Are there any questions about these?
I'll move that we approve the accounts payable order to checks to Howard Center for Human Services in the amount of $67,560.35.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll ask Elizabeth, since she's on.
I will. I had just a quick question. It references multiple checks, but it has one amount.
Yes.
Order checks. I did say checks, didn't I, instead of checks?
Well, it says checks in our agenda, and it says,
I assume it's a check.
and it just says, and then the actual information we have to support it says a payment,
Right.
one payment to Howard Center. But then, as usual, it has the list of the various items that are included in the overall payment to Howard Center. So it's unclear whether
It
the
should be
physical
check.
Okay,
It
so
should be
it's just a
check.
typo essentially
And
on
then
our
this,
on our agenda.
So
Okay.
I will say aye.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth.